The smell hit Jake first, sharp, artificial and overwhelmingly soapy. It clung to the air like a chemical fog, making his eyes water. He stepped onto the patio, his bare feet sticking slightly to the damp surface. Then he saw it. His pool was a churning, foamy disaster. Thick white bubbles overflowed onto the deck, creeping toward his lawn in slow, frothy waves. It looked like some over-the-top prank from a sitcom, except it wasn't funny. Jake's stomach tightened as he processed what had happened. His once clear water was now a cauldron of detergent, reeking of lavender and bleach. This wasn't an accident. Someone had done this deliberately. His fists clenched as the realization settled in. Karen. The HOA president had been waging a personal war against him for months, nitpicking every aspect of his home and life. His lawn was too wild despite being freshly mowed. His car was an eyesore for sitting in the driveway overnight. And the pool? That had been her latest obsession. She'd cornered him just yesterday, standing in her usual power stance, arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her surgically tight forehead. "This pool was never approved, Jake," she'd said, voice dripping with manufactured politeness. "It doesn't need to be approved," he'd countered. "It's within regulation. I checked." She tilted her head, offering a tight-lipped smirk. "Regulations can be updated." That smirk had been the warning shot. He should have known she wouldn't stop at words. He stormed back into the house, grabbing his phone. Security footage. His cameras had caught everything. He scrolled through the night's recording, fast-forwarding until movement flashed on the screen. And there she was, 2:13 a.m. Karen, dressed in black like a low-budget burglar, dragging a massive bucket toward his pool. She leaned over, poured the contents in, then scurried away like a rodent. Jake let out a low, humorless laugh. She wasn't even subtle. His thumb hovered over the call button. The HOA? Pointless. The board bent to Karen's will. The police? He wasn't sure if they'd consider soap a criminal offense. But what he did know, what burned in his chest, was that he wasn't letting this go. He threw open his front door and marched across the street. Karen's house was pristine, of course. A perfect display of rigid, suburban control. Every blade of grass manicured, every flower bed arranged with psychotic precision. He pounded on the door. A long pause. Then the handle turned. Karen stood there in silk loungewear, a steaming mug of coffee in hand, the picture of smug serenity. "Jake," she said, feigning surprise. "To what do I owe this?" "Cut the act." He held up his phone, screen still frozen on the incriminating footage. "I know what you did." Karen took a leisurely sip of coffee. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You ruined my pool." She laughed, a small, condescending chuckle. "Oh, Jake, you really think I would sneak into your yard in the middle of the night? That's ridiculous." He jabbed at the screen. "This is you." Karen tilted her head, giving the footage a casual glance before shrugging. "I don't see how that proves anything. Could be anyone." His grip on the phone tightened. "You're wearing the same damn robe." She gave a slow, knowing smile. "Then prove it." Jake's pulse pounded in his ears. She was daring him. She knew he had no real recourse. The HOA? She controlled it. The neighbors? Too scared of her to take sides. And legally? It was just soap. No property damage, no real crime. She leaned in slightly. "It's just a pool, Jake. Maybe next time, you'll think twice before going against HOA recommendations." She patted his arm as if he were a child, then stepped back inside. The door clicked shut, leaving him standing there, seething. He turned, jaw clenched so tight it ached. Across the street, his ruined pool glistened mockingly in the sunlight. She thought she'd won. She was wrong. Jake sat in his truck outside the HOA office, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. He'd spent the last hour on hold with the police, only to be told they couldn't do much. "It's a civil dispute," the officer had said. "Not criminal." Apparently, trespassing and property tampering didn't count if all it resulted in was soap. Fine. If the police wouldn't help, he'd take it to the HOA board. Surely even they had limits. He marched inside, past the cheaply furnished lobby, straight to the meeting room where the board convened. 5 people sat around a long table, men and women in pastel sweaters and collared shirts, the self-appointed rulers of the neighborhood. At the head of the table, of course, sat Karen. She barely glanced up. "Jake," she said smoothly, "what a surprise." He tossed a printed screenshot of the security footage onto the table. "Karen vandalized my pool." A man with salt and pepper hair, Bill, the vice president, frowned as he looked at the paper. "Vandalized?" She poured detergent into it. That's trespassing and property damage. Karen sighed, setting down her pen. Jake, let's not be dramatic. I certainly didn't vandalize anything. And frankly, your pool has been an issue for a while. It's not an issue, Jake snapped. It's perfectly within regulations. Bill rubbed his chin. Karen, is this true? Karen didn't even hesitate. Oh, absolutely not. The pool's placement is disruptive to the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. And while we haven't enforced any penalties yet, I'd been planning to bring it to the board's attention. Jake scoffed. So you just took it upon yourself to sabotage it? Karen pressed a hand to her chest, feigning shock. Jake, you really think I'd do something so childish? The board members shifted uncomfortably. Some of them were clearly wary of her, but not a single one dared to speak up. Bill cleared his throat. Well, unfortunately, without clear evidence of intent, there's not much we can do. If there were damages, you could pursue it legally, but as far as the HOA is concerned. So you're not going to do anything? Karen smiled sweetly. I understand this is frustrating for you, Jake. But we do need to discuss something important. She slid a folder across the table. Jake opened it. A formal violation notice. Failure to obtain aesthetic approval for your pool, Karen said. And failure to maintain neighborhood consistency. I'm afraid you'll need to drain and remove it within 30 days. A laugh of disbelief escaped him. You can't be serious. I warned you yesterday, didn't I? She said, tilting her head. Regulations can be updated. Jake slammed the folder shut and stood. This is harassment. Jake, Bill said, holding up a hand, let's keep things civil. There's nothing civil about this. Karen folded her hands on the table. Then I guess you'll need to decide if this neighborhood is still the right fit for you. Jake glared at her, at all of them. They wouldn't help. They never would. He'd spent months ignoring her games, trying to play by the rules, and where had it gotten him? Fines. Threats. Now this. Karen was still smiling when he walked out. The rage simmered in his chest the whole drive home. He parked, staring at the ruined pool in his backyard. The foamy residue had thinned, but the water was still cloudy, still useless. He thought about draining it, about how smug Karen would be when she saw him cave. No. If she wanted the pool gone, she'd have to fight him for it. A plan formed in his mind, slow and deliberate. He grabbed his phone and started researching. Regulations. Neighborhood policies. City ordinances. He scrolled through pages of legal jargon, searching for the right loophole, the right opportunity. Then he found it. A grin spread across his face. Karen wanted to play dirty? Fine. He could play dirty too. Jake stood at the edge of his pool, watching the last of the tainted water swirl down the drainage pipe. The smell of detergent still lingered in the air, clinging to his skin, but he didn't care. He had bigger things to focus on. A single hose snaked from the pool to the street, its nozzle directed straight onto Karen's pristine, obsessively maintained lawn. Sudsy water streamed across the sidewalk, seeping into the perfectly trimmed grass that she took so much pride in. It was poetic, really. She had ruined his pool with soap, and now her precious lawn was about to drown in it. Jake didn't rush. He let the process unfold slowly, methodically. The soapy flood spread inch by inch, saturating the soil. Detergent wasn't just water. It lingered, stripped away nutrients, choked the roots. Her lawn wouldn't die immediately. No, it would be a slow decay, just like she had tried to impose on him. By the time he was done, the sun had started to rise. He coiled up the hose, wiped his hands on his jeans, and went inside to make coffee. The reaction came faster than he expected. An outraged shriek echoed through the neighborhood, loud enough to rattle windows. Jake smirked, taking a slow sip of his drink as he peered through the blinds. Karen stood in her front yard, robe billowing, hands gripping her head as she took in the damage. The once emerald green grass now bore large, sickly patches of yellow where the detergent had taken hold. The damage wasn't complete yet, but she could see where it was headed. Her head snapped up, and even from across the street, Jake could see the fury in her eyes. She stormed toward his house, marching up the driveway with the force of a woman who had never been told no in her life. She pounded on the door. He took his time opening it. When he finally did, he leaned casually against the frame. Karen? He greeted, voice as smooth as the coffee in his mug. What brings you by? Her nostrils flared. You did this. He raised an eyebrow. Did what? She gestured wildly toward her lawn. My yard is ruined. Jake tilted his head, pretending to examine the damage. Looks like some kind of chemical imbalance in the soil. That's unfortunate. Karen jabbed a finger at his chest. You drained that disgusting soapy mess onto my property, Jake shrugged. Well, I had to drain it somewhere. After all, someone dumped detergent into my pool. Oh wait. He let his voice drop to a mock whisper. I can't prove that, can I? Her face turned an alarming shade of red. I'll have you fined for this. Jake gave her a slow smile. Actually, you won't. She opened her mouth, but he held up a hand. You see, Karen, I took the liberty of reviewing the HOA bylaws. Turns out, there's no rule against draining pool water, only restrictions on stormwater runoff. And since detergent technically isn't a toxic chemical, I didn't break any municipal codes either. He folded his arms. Which means you have nothing on me. Her hands clenched into fists. You think you're so clever? Oh, I know I am. Karen's jaw tightened, but before she could spew more threats, a voice called out from the sidewalk. Everything all right? Bill, the HOA vice president, stood a few feet away, watching the exchange with obvious interest. Other neighbors had begun to linger as well, pretending to check their mail or water their plants while sneaking glances at the confrontation. Karen stiffened. Her authority thrived on whispers, on quiet intimidation behind closed doors. But now, with an audience, her usual tactics wouldn't work. Jake turned to Bill. Karen was just expressing some concerns about her lawn. Bill looked at the patchy grass and raised a brow. Yikes. That's some serious damage. Karen forced a smile. It's nothing really. Just an unfortunate accident. Jake almost laughed at how hard it was for her to swallow those words. Bill gave him a knowing look before nodding. Well, hope you get that sorted, Karen. She shot Jake a glare sharp enough to cut glass before spinning on her heel and stomping back to her house. Jake took another slow sip of coffee. This wasn't over. Not yet. But for the first time in months he had the upper hand. And that was worth savoring. Karen's lawn died within the week. It didn't wither gracefully. The once pristine emerald grass turned a sickly yellow, then brown, then brittle. Patches of dirt peeked through like open wounds. Her perfect garden, her pride, the symbol of her control over the neighborhood, it was collapsing in real time. Jake watched the slow decay unfold with quiet satisfaction. He never once spoke to her about it. He didn't need to. Karen saw him every day sitting on his porch enjoying the show. At first she tried to fight it. She called in an emergency landscaping service, but they only confirmed what Jake already knew: detergent-laced soil was tricky. The chemicals had seeped deep, and no amount of watering or reseeding could reverse it overnight. It would take months to regrow. Then she tried to cover it up. A shipment of expensive sod arrived at her doorstep, and within hours workers were laying down fresh, bright green grass. But there was a problem. The roots couldn't take. The detergent was still present, still poisoning the earth. Within days, the new grass wilted and curled at the edges, revealing the rotting ground beneath. Karen started looking different too. The perfect composure she always carried, the effortless grace, gone. Stress wore on her. She no longer strutted through the neighborhood like she owned it. Instead, she hurried between her house and her car, avoiding eye contact with the same people she once ruled over. It was almost over. But not yet. Jake had one last move to make. The next HOA meeting was packed. Word had spread fast about Karen's declining empire, and the neighbors, once too scared to speak against her, were now hungry for blood. Jake sat near the back, arms crossed, watching as Karen took her usual seat at the head of the table. But something was different. She looked smaller. The confidence she wielded like a weapon was cracking. She could feel it, the way people were whispering, the way they were watching, waiting. Bill cleared his throat. We have a new item on today's agenda. He turned to Jake. You requested to speak? Jake stood, taking his time as he walked to the front of the room. He felt Karen's eyes on him, but he didn't look at her. Not yet. I've lived in this neighborhood for years, he began, voice steady. I followed the rules. Paid my dues. Tried to be a good neighbor. His gaze finally met Karen's. But some people don't think the rules apply to them. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jake pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. The projector flickered to life, casting an image onto the wall. The security footage. There was Karen, caught in grainy black and white, dumping soap into his pool in the dead of night. A collective gasp filled the room. Karen shot to her feet. This is ridiculous. Jake didn't flinch. That's you, Karen? On my property. Tampering with my belongings. Bill leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Karen, do you have an explanation? She opened her mouth, then closed it. She had nothing. Jake turned back to the crowd. This is the person running our HOA. Someone who thinks she's above the rules. Who fines people for the smallest infractions while breaking them herself. He let the weight of his words settle. So tell me, does this seem like someone who should still be in charge? Silence. Then one by one hands started to rise. A vote. A reckoning. Karen's face drained of color. Wait, she stammered, this isn't how things work. But it was. By the end of the night, she was removed from her position. Jake didn't stick around for the aftermath. He'd won. That was enough. The next morning he stood in his backyard, staring at his newly filled pool. The water was clear again, shimmering under the sun. Across the street, Karen's door slammed. He glanced up just in time to see her hauling bags into her car. She caught him watching. For the first time there was no glare, no sneer, just quiet defeat. Jake lifted his coffee mug in salute. Karen turned away. By the time the weekend rolled around, the house was empty. Jake took a long, satisfied breath, then leaned back in his chair. For the first time in a long time, the neighborhood felt peaceful.